Background there, you see the Church of Chestandia, fortified church, and you see the. I'll get my camera straight here. The prying eyes, we call them. It's well, they weren't put here by the communist authorities. They were around long before then. They certainly made use of them, and somebody's always watching you, and we're seeing that right now in this COVID-19 virus thing that's going around, and a lot of the churches trying to be shut down to nothing. Not even some mayors and governors not even allowing drive-in church or do it outside in their cars, and urging people to spy on one another. There's several. I said there's used to be our biggest danger and the biggest threat was communism, socialism that we saw here, and then we began to bring in a bunch of Muslims, and the problem with that is, and I'm not anti-Muslim per se, I am anti-Islam because it's a wicked, barbaric religion. But there's individuals in it that not all are terrorists. Some don't. Just like Christians, they're kind of borderline, and they don't know that much about themselves. They're not that committed to it, even though they call themselves Muslims. So, I'm not down on everybody, but the problem is this: there's two main groups: Shia Muslims and Sunni Muslims. They hate each other as much as they do Christians and Jews. And they fight and kill each other. Both are terrorists, can be terrorists. And so when you just begin to take in some group just because they're being oppressed where they're at, they need to be checked out very good, because a lot of times what they are, you've got one terrorist group fleeing another terrorist group, whichever's got the upper hand there. And so you have to watch out. And if you aren't careful, you're just bringing in, and that's what we've done, really. We brought in a lot of terrorists because they were the minority group in that particular case. But when the tables turned, they end up being the oppressors and the terrorists, and the other group is looking for somebody to save them. So a lot of people don't understand that. There's now two groups in after that. You got that want to undo the Constitution, want to overthrow the government, and do something different. You've got now a third group. You've got it's not as prevalent as the other two yet, but it's growing. And it is this sovereign citizen type thing. It undergoes a lot of different variations. A lot of Q people are into it, QAnons, and that's what I'm about, is just exposing the lies that are that I've found in there. And this goes back. Had a friend that had really pushed this on me and at me, and I checked it out, curiosity to see what was in it. And some of the stuff I agreed with wholeheartedly. About the evil and the wickedness of this world and other things. And so I found some stuff, though, that I said didn't make sense. And they're always saying, question everything, question everything. Well, that's what they're saying is question everything but them. Everything but what they've got. You're not supposed to question it. And when you do, you're going to be pushed back out pretty strong. And so begin to get all this stuff. And so it's one thing said, the premise was that the Constitution was no longer in force because in 1871 the United States was made to pay off its debt was sold out to some people that made it a um, incorporation. And it tells you where to go to look. It tells you exactly where to go to look. Uh, I'd say evidently nobody's ever going to look at it, or either see what they're suggested that they're supposed to see. I did go look it up, and what I found was that act gives it makes the District of Columbia an incorporation. It doesn't say anything about the United States. And before you think, well, that's still pretty serious, maybe the United States still comes under that somehow. It plainly says an incorporation for municipal purposes only. I've read it. You can go look at it. And I read through it. That's the only thing I could find. The city, or not city, well, it is city now, City of District of Columbia, incorporated, well, I think it was Washington and Georgetown into one city, under one city incorporation. In other words, it's a incorporated municipality, just like every other city in the United States. That's all it is. And when I put that on my Facebook, immediately got attacked and said I hadn't read far enough. But the thing is, they want you to keep reading until you're supposed to find whatever it is they want you to look for. But they'll never just put it out there. They've got the proof. If they got the proof, just put it out there. But they can't, because it's not there. And I've seen so many other things. So one of the things I want to talk about today is you've got this prison reform and social justice type stuff going on within it now. And so, it makes me angry to see the left when they talk about this country as, when's America ever been great again? It probably does a lot of you, a lot of people. But now that's basically what we're getting from this group on the right, the Q group mostly, and there's others too, different variations, and they're saying, well, we've been illegally run by a corporation all these years, and so if that, and they're evil, they're because of this and they're because of that. We've worked with slaves under them, so that, they won't come out and say it, but why don't they? Evidently, America's never been great with them either. I have to say, if that were true, if we've really been under a corporation, evidently they've done a pretty good job, and I've had a pretty good life. So if that were true, hey, why mess with it? Part of it is anti-Semitism. All these wicked bankers are Jewish. They call them pseudo-Jews or fake Jews or whatever. But it boils down to a type of anti-Semitism. And then, and I know, about the Rothschilds and Rockefellers. Maybe they are. But I do know that we're not under a corporation. I've highlighted, I put it on my Facebook a couple of times, and unfortunately my friend unfriended me or blocked me, which didn't make, I wasn't going back to see what he was saying or whatever, but and this is the reason I'm saying that is this is not about anybody. This is about exposing lies in this Q stuff and other things. Not just that, but there's a lot of these fake conspiracy theories out there. They got a lot of truth in them, but then, man, there's so much junk in there mixed in. Prison reform. I worked for most of my adult life doing prison ministry. I have ended up eventually in 2004 going to work for a prison when the economy got so bad. Worked as an officer, and then eventually my last few years finished up as a sergeant. And so I've seen both sides of it. And I began to hear this thing before I left. Some of the inmates claiming that they were being worked like slaves. They were slaves because they had to work a couple hours a day, working as janitors and one thing and another, keeping the facility clean. They did the crime, but they don't want, pay for it. They don't want to do the time. If they do the time, then they won't do it watching TV and playing cards and whatever else they want to do, playing basketball. Yeah, I worked there for 11 years, retired. So I've seen a little bit of everything. I was going to talk about that a little bit. I may have to do it more than just this one video. But if anybody has worked as a slave, it's not been the inmates. They get a small pay. Of course, they've got a canteen where they can buy some things. It's pretty cheap, but it's not like they have a shopping mall they can go spend all that money anywhere. And like I say, they need to be paying. They should be paying for their upkeep, and their families are now coming. Some of them, they've got them calling and saying, well, their family members are being worked as slaves in the prison. That's nonsense. Let me ask you a question. If you and I are having to work to pay taxes to help keep them up, and let me throw this in there right quick too. The cost of incarcerating one inmate is approximately the same as it is to send someone to college, a year of college. So tell me, if you and I are having to work and pay taxes to keep their facility up ourselves, pay janitors and whatever, who's the slave? I'd say you and I are the slaves, not the inmates. As they sit back and relax and, like I say, watch pretty much what they want to on TV. Very few restrictions. There are a few, but not many. Play cards, gamble. Not supposed to, but they get by with it. They know how to do it. And go out to the yard and play basketball a couple times a day. So yeah, they really worked as slaves. I started to work, like I said, in 2004. The prison hadn't opened up that I went to yet, and I have to be careful about. I don't know if I'll post this just to my friends or I'll make it more available. We'll see. Put it on YouTube, but there are safety concerns. I felt like I was a good officer. I tried to treat the inmates like human beings, and most officers did. It's like anything else. You got good and bad. You look in society, you got good and bad. Guess where the police departments and law enforcement, correctional officers, whatever, guess where they get the people from? They get them from society. And so there's a mixture there. A few bad apples slip through once in a while, but the vast majority are not. I kind of take issue with some of that stuff. Now, this is one of the things that's going on. Now, they're trying to tell people that these private prisons, that the judges have ownership in them. Now, I can't prove or disprove. I doubt that they can. It's a charge they make. And they don't have to prove things, just like the left. They don't have to prove anything. They operate just like Democrats did when, a political Republican or a political opponent runs against one of their people, or just like we saw with Judge Kavanaugh here originally. you make the charge. That's all you have to do. You don't have to prove it, and the damage is done. And so that's what they do. They make these charges. Don't have to prove them. So I don't know whether the judges own any stock in any of these private prisons. I do know they tried them in North Carolina, and they found out they didn't work too good, and so the state started taking them back over. And so they've essentially put a end to that. I think they may be still one or two. I don't know. But here's what they're saying. Now, is there any crime going on? You watch TV, you watch the news. Is there still murders? Is there still gang activity, fights and things like that going on? Would you have any trouble, you think, the police have any trouble going out and finding criminals if they really wanted to do that? I don't think so. But that's the charge, is these judges own, and you can tell they've got a lot of ex-inmates in this movement, making these charges, that these judges, once the inmate population starts falling too low, I don't know where that's happened at lately, to be honest with you. But once that happens, it supposedly does, then they just go out and grab somebody off the street, lock them up, more people up, because it's hurting their business. Nonsense. If you believe that, you can judge yourself. I'll not do it. But there's no problem finding people to lock up. It's not a problem at all. There's plenty of people out there. There's plenty of crime going on. That's just another lie that they spread. And I don't mind calling it that. And I don't mind saying that there's a lot of outright lies that are spread, by these organizations. They put them out there. They make the charges, and like I say, just like the Kavanaugh hearing and some of the other hearings that they do, our political campaign, they did the same thing to Judge Roy Moore. They just make these charges out there, and you're left trying to defend them, and it doesn't matter. And they'll take anything. It don't matter if it's 40 years ago, whatever, and build on it and try to break down somebody's character. Well, that's what they're doing with these movements. That's what Sovereign Citizen, the Posse Comitatus, they're all telling how evil that our government is, not just the deep state, or either they're trying to say deep state's the whole government. Everything's corrupt, and so it just needs to be redone. And basically, they're wanting to overthrow the government. Of course, they're trying to say that the government's in place now is not the right government that belongs there. But they're trying to get as many people, join the cause as they can. Question everything. Question the one that says question everything. And I don't mind being questioned. This is nonsense, and you can check it out and look at it. You can see the lies that are in it. You can see the innuendos that are there that are unproven. And what they'd like to do is ask questions, make you think, to cast doubt, just like Satan did in the garden. Did God really say? Did God really say this? And so they do the same thing, and they'll ask these types of questions. Well, I kind of like to ask questions back, of them. And so far, I haven't got many answers. I get a lot of charges, and even been called a leftist. I said, I've never had that happen before. Anyway, I made this way too long. I was going to do a little more on my work inside the prison, what that was like. Do that in another video.